The relationship between the United States and Israel is often scrutinized, with some arguing that Israel functions as a strategic military base for the US in the Middle East. Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, and members of the academic community, welcome to my channel, Words of Inspiration. I welcome you to this session on Is Israel a country or a US military base? My name is Masood Saeed, a psychologist. The United States has provided substantial military aid to Israel, with the Congressional Research Service reporting over $146 billion in bilateral assistance since 1948. According to a 2016 report by the US Department of Defense, Israel is a key partner in the region, hosting joint military exercises and sharing intelligence. Declassified documents reveal that the US has established pre-positioned military stockpiles in Israel, which are accessible to both nations in times of conflict. The 1987 Memorandum of Agreement between the US and Israel outlined strategic cooperation, emphasizing the importance of Israel in US defense strategy. These documented instances highlight the depth of military collaboration, suggesting a relationship that extends beyond traditional diplomatic ties. This analysis is based on verifiable sources, including government reports and declassified materials, providing a factual basis for understanding the US-Israel dynamic. Have you ever wondered what £3 billion a year actually looks like? It's a staggering sum of money, enough to fundamentally change the fortunes of a small nation, or perhaps to secure its allegiance. This isn't a hypothetical question. It's the amount the United States has for decades provided to Israel in military aid. It's a figure that sits at the very heart of a deeply uncomfortable and provocative question. Is Israel a sovereign country making its own way in a tough neighborhood? Or is it something else entirely? Something more akin to an unsinkable aircraft carrier for the United States, permanently docked in the most volatile region on Earth? This is the question that Masood Saeed, a psychologist known for his deep dives into motivations, has brought into sharp focus. This isn't a conspiracy theory whispered in dark corners of the internet. It is a serious argument, one supported by a surprising number of academics, politicians, and commentators. The logic is straightforward. If one nation's military and economic survival is almost entirely dependent on the goodwill and financial support of another, can it truly be called independent? The American political scientist John Mearsheimer states quite plainly that the US-Israel relationship is unique and that Israel is not a vital strategic asset but rather a liability, yet the support continues unabated. This triggers our sense of curiosity, making us ask, what is the real nature of this bond if not simple alliance? The argument posits that the State of Israel functions as a forward operating base for American interests in the Middle East. It's a strategic foothold, a listening post, and a military proxy. This allows the US to project power without deploying large numbers of its own troops, a politically sensitive act since the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. American General George Christ, former commander of US Central Command, once referred to Israel as the largest American aircraft carrier in the world that cannot be sunk. This isn't the language one typically uses to describe a sovereign ally. It's the language of strategic assets, of military hardware, of a base. For you sitting here today, this might feel distant, abstract, but it's not. The money that fuels this arrangement comes from taxpayers. The policies that are shaped by it have global consequences affecting everything from the price of petrol to the threat of international conflict. This isn't just about a small strip of land thousands of miles away. It's about a web of money, power, and fear that stretches across the globe and quietly touches our lives. The danger inherent in such a volatile arrangement is palpable. We are all, whether we realize it or not, stakeholders in the answer to this very strange and very important question. To understand the present, we have to look at the past. The relationship between the United States and Israel wasn't always this intense. In fact, for the first couple of decades after Israel's founding in 1948, the US was somewhat ambivalent. It was the Cold War that changed everything. The 1967 Six-Day War was the turning point. Israel's swift and decisive victory demonstrated its military prowess, and American policymakers saw an opportunity. They saw a reliable, technologically advanced partner that could counter Soviet influence in the region, which was spreading through Arab states like Egypt and Syria. This is where the money trigger really kicks in. A strategic investment was made. Historian Rashid Khalidi notes that after 1967, Israel came to be seen in Washington as a strategic asset. The aid began to flow, and it wasn't just cash. It was the best military technology the US had to offer. This created a cycle of dependency. Israel needed the weapons to maintain its qualitative military edge over its neighbors, and the US needed Israel to be strong enough to protect its interests. It became a self perpetuating loop. The more aid Israel received, the more it integrated its military and intelligence apparatus with America's. It was a marriage of convenience, born from the cold logic of geopolitical chess. This deep integration is visible everywhere. From joint military exercises to intelligence sharing, the two nations operate almost as a single unit in the Middle East. The scholar Noam Chomsky has argued for years that this relationship is not about shared values, but about a shared refusal to accept the international consensus on the essentials of a diplomatic settlement. In his view, Israel helps the US subvert international law and maintain control. This is the danger element. A partnership that actively works against global norms creates instability and resentment, making the world a more dangerous place for everyone. This historical context is crucial because it strips away the emotional and ideological arguments, revealing a foundation built on pure pragmatism. It wasn't a love affair, it was a business deal. And like any deal, we have to ask who benefits most. Is it a partnership of equals, or is it a relationship between a patron and a client state? A state whose primary function from the patron's perspective is to serve as a military and strategic base. The evidence from history suggests the latter is a very real possibility, one that challenges our basic understanding of what it means to be a country. To truly get to grips with this situation, we need to move beyond politics and into the realm of psychology. Masood Saeed's work here is particularly insightful. He argues that the Israeli national psyche is defined by a deep-seated fortress mentality. This is a collective psychological state born from centuries of persecution, culminating in the horror of the Holocaust. It's a mindset that says, we are alone, surrounded by enemies, and we can trust no one. This profound sense of existential fear is the primary motivational trigger. It creates a powerful, almost primal need for a protector, a powerful ally who can guarantee survival. This psychological vulnerability, according to Saeed, is what made Israel the perfect candidate for a client state. The United States didn't have to force its influence, it simply had to offer security. In the language of psychology, this is a classic codependent relationship. Israel, driven by fear, gets a sense of safety and security from its powerful patron. America, in turn, gets an unwavering ally that will do its bidding in a critical region. Western psychologist Dr. Stanley Milgram's experiments on obedience to authority showed how easily people will cede their autonomy to a figure they perceive as a legitimate protector, even if it means acting against their own judgment. This fortress mentality is reinforced constantly, both from within and without. Israeli leaders frequently evoke the memory of the Holocaust and the threat of annihilation to justify their policies. The constant state of conflict with its neighbors serves as a daily reminder of the perceived danger. This creates a psychological environment where dependence on a superpower doesn't feel like a loss of sovereignty, it feels like a necessary survival strategy. It's a paradox. The very actions taken to secure the nation, utter reliance on a foreign power, are the same actions that call its sovereignty into question. It's a gilded cage, but from the inside it feels like a sanctuary. For us, understanding this psychological dimension is key. It helps us see why a nation would seemingly trade its independence for security. It's not about logic, it's about a deep, emotional, and very human fear of extinction. It explains the fierce, often unquestioning, loyalty to the United States. Saeed suggests this isn't a healthy state of being for any nation. A country perpetually driven by fear cannot build genuine peace with its neighbors. It can only build higher walls and become more dependent on its protector, deepening its role as a strategic outpost rather than a truly independent nation. It's impossible to talk about Israel without acknowledging the role of religion. For many supporters, the modern state of Israel is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. This belief adds a powerful, almost mystical layer to the political situation. The Quran, for instance, speaks of the children of Israel and the land promised to them, but it also warns against corruption and arrogance. According to the Quran, Surah Al Isra, chapter 17, verses 4 to 7, states that they would cause great corruption in the land twice, followed by punishment. These verses describe two periods of corruption and arrogance by the children of Israel, each followed by divine punishment through the nations of power. Scholars such as Imam Ibn Kathir, 2003, Tafsir Ibn Kathir, volume 5, page 33, interpret this as a warning of moral decay and accountability, a recurring pattern when truth is abandoned and corruption spreads. Muslim scholars like Dr. Yasir Qadi have discussed how these verses are interpreted by some as a prophecy relating to the modern state of Israel and its future. This religious narrative is not confined to Judaism and Islam. It's a huge factor in American support for Israel, particularly among Christian evangelicals. For millions of American Christians, the existence of Israel is a prerequisite for the second coming of Jesus. This belief creates a powerful political lobby that pushes for unwavering support for Israel, regardless of its actions. According to Sahih al-Bukhari, Book 1, Hadith 1, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "The deeds are considered by the intentions, and every person will have only what they intended." For these believers, the intention is not geopolitical strategy, it is the fulfillment of God's plan. This makes the US-Israel alliance feel sacred and non-negotiable. This fusion of prophecy and policy creates a dangerous cocktail. It elevates a political dispute into a holy war, making compromise seem like a betrayal of faith. I argue that this is a form of psychological hijacking where religious texts are used to justify modern political aims. The paradox is that a state established on a secular political Zionist ideology now heavily relies on religious arguments for its international support. This is where you see the strategic use of religious sentiment to mask what is, at its core, a military and colonial project. This matters to all of us because when politics becomes theology, rational debate becomes impossible. It becomes a clash of absolute truths. The idea that Israel is a US military base is an analytical argument based on evidence. But if you believe the state's existence is a divine mandate, that evidence becomes irrelevant. You are no longer debating policy, you are questioning God. This is a conversation stopper. It prevents us from critically examining the relationship and its consequences, locking both nations into a path that may not be in the long-term interest of either their people or the world. Here we arrive at the central paradox of Israel's existence. On one hand, it possesses one of the most powerful and technologically advanced militaries in the world. It has nuclear weapons, a thriving tech industry, and a formidable intelligence service. It can project power across the region and act with a degree of impunity that few other nations enjoy. By these measures, it seems like the very definition of a strong sovereign state. It appears to be the master of its own destiny, a small nation that has defied the odds to become a regional superpower. But this strength is, in many ways, an illusion. It is almost entirely underwritten by the United States. Take away the £3 billion in annual military aid, the vetoes at the UN Security Council, and the shared intelligence, and the picture changes dramatically. The philosopher Jean Paul Sartre once wrote about the nature of freedom, arguing that one is only truly free when not dependent on the goodwill of another. Can a nation be considered sovereign if its very survival depends on a weekly phone call to Washington? It's a classic paradox. Its immense power is the very symbol of its profound dependence. This dependence forces Israel into a narrow corner, limiting its foreign policy options. It cannot afford to seriously alienate its patron. When the US asks it to test a new weapon system, share intelligence on a rival, or refrain from a certain military action, can it truly say no? The scholar Norman Finkelstein argues that Israel functions as an enforcer state for the US, using its military to discipline disobedient neighbors and maintain American dominance. This role, while providing short-term security, prevents Israel from ever achieving genuine peace or integration in its own region. It will always be seen as an outsider, a foreign implant. This is the gilded cage. Israel has all the trappings of power, the jets, the tanks, the technology, but it lacks the one thing that defines true sovereignty, the freedom to act in its own long-term best interest, even if that means disagreeing with its protector. This should make us all reflect on the nature of power and freedom. Having a powerful friend is useful, but if that friend pays all your bills and provides all your security, are they still just a friend, or have they become your master? This is the uncomfortable reality that sits at the heart of the US-Israel relationship. So, how does all of this connect to you personally? Let's follow the money. The £3 billion or $3.8 billion that the US sends to Israel every year is your money. If you are an American taxpayer, you are directly funding this arrangement. But even if you're not, you are still affected. This vast sum is money that could be spent on healthcare, education, or infrastructure at home. Instead, it is used to fund a foreign military. Renowned economist Jeffrey Sachs has repeatedly argued that this level of military spending diverts critical resources from addressing urgent global issues like poverty and climate change. This financial connection is the most direct link between this geopolitical issue and our daily lives. It's not an abstract concept, it's a tangible transfer of wealth. This massive subsidy allows Israel to maintain its military occupation of the Palestinian territories, which in turn fuels a cycle of violence and instability. That instability doesn't stay in the Middle East. It radiates outwards, contributing to refugee crises, inspiring extremist groups, and increasing the risk of wider wars that can draw in our own countries. The danger becomes personal when the consequences of these policies arrive at our doorstep. Furthermore, this special relationship distorts our own politics. Lobbying groups in Western capitals work tirelessly to ensure that this flow of money and political support continues no matter what. This can mean that your elected representatives are making decisions based not on your interests or even your country's interests, but on the interests of this strategic alliance. This undermines the democratic process. It creates a situation where a foreign policy issue is ring-fenced from public debate, driven by money and special interests rather than the will of the people. This is a direct challenge to the sovereignty of our own nations. Ultimately, we are all paying the price for this arrangement. We pay for it with our taxes. We pay for it with the increased insecurity and instability in the world, and we pay for it with the erosion of our own democratic systems. By framing Israel as a military base, we are forced to confront this reality. We are no longer talking about supporting an ally. We are talking about funding a permanent military installation. And that is a conversation every citizen in a democracy has a right and a responsibility to be a part of. It's your money, your security, and your democracy at stake. So we return to our original question. Is Israel a country or a US military base? As we've explored, the answer is not a simple yes or no. It exists in a strange and uncomfortable gray area. On paper, it is a sovereign nation with a seat at the United Nations. It has a government, a population, and defined, though contested, borders. It has all the formal attributes of a country. But in practice, its survival, its military strength, and its political standing are so profoundly dependent on the United States that its autonomy is severely compromised. It acts less like a peer and more like a client. The evidence from history shows a relationship built not on shared values, but on cold, hard strategic interests. The psychological analysis reveals a nation driven by a deep seated fear, making it susceptible to a codependent relationship with a superpower. The scriptural arguments, both Islamic and Christian, are used to provide a divine justification for what is essentially a military pact, and the economic reality shows a direct line from the pockets of Western taxpayers to the maintenance of this arrangement. It is, in the words of many critics, a fortress state funded and directed by a foreign power. This exploration isn't about singling out one nation for criticism, it's about encouraging a more honest and critical way of looking at the world. It's about peeling back the layers of propaganda and emotion to see the machinery of power at work. The triggers of money, fear, danger, and paradox are not unique to this situation. They are the fundamental drivers of human and state behavior everywhere. By understanding how they work here, we can become more adept at spotting them in our own lives and in our own societies. This is the universal value of this inquiry. Ultimately, the question of whether Israel is a country or a base is less important than the act of asking the question itself. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, dependency, and the very meaning of sovereignty in our interconnected world. It challenges us to look beyond the headlines and the slogans and to think for ourselves. The purpose of a lecture like this is not to give you all the answers, but to leave you with better questions. And in a world saturated with simple, often misleading narratives, a good question is the most valuable thing you can have. Thank you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. To stay connected with more inspiring content, your support helps us reach more people and keep these important conversations alive. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, or personal experiences. Share them in the comments below. Your voice truly matters. Together, we can build a meaningful dialogue that benefits us all. Thank you for watching. May this video serve as a source of knowledge and reflection.